Hello friends, welcome back to the bench. Our patient is an AM86A, which makes it a Subaru Outback, probably LL Bean, and probably 2007 or 8, or perhaps 9. Makes no difference, the issue is misfires, intermittent misfire on cylinder number 1, and there's no signs of prior repairs, which is good. We have one ECM coming probably. I don't know, the customer hasn't really purchased yet, and I don't know if he's sending the ECM or not, but he tried to perform the repair himself, and I think what he said, like the hot air gun just kind of fell on it or something like that, and he ripped a few pads off. So he wanted to buy a new ECM, but I suggested that let's try to fix that one. There's no pad that was ripped off that we can't possibly fix, unless there's like significant damage to the board, some bulging and stuff, maybe. But any ripped pads, that's no big deal. We can retrace it. I don't even charge any extra for retracing at the moment. I will have to eventually to make the business work, but at the moment, whatever you send me, it'll be fixed, even if I have to retrace it. Anyways, the subject of our video today, other than this repair, is something that might interest you, especially if you're a gamer. I'm not a gamer myself, but I do play. I have played, obviously. I'm a millennial. And on top of that, I'm a software engineer, right? So I think it might interest you, my take on it. And the subject is Concord, the game released by Sony after 8 years of development, and it is estimated that they spent $400 million on it. And that's going to be a big tax write-off. It's not like it's going to kill the company, right? But it's a massive failure. So let's consider this whole situation. First, let's establish how software is actually developed, right? And fundamentally, we have two fundamentally different ways of developing software. One that is very popular nowadays and has been for quite a few years now, that we refer to as a agile. And you know, agile is an adjective actually, right? But we refer to it as a noun. Like we do agile, or in agile we do this, or we practice agile. Well, technically it's an adjective. It comes from the manifesto for agile software development. It's basically what it sounds like. It's a manifesto. It's a small document that has been drafted by the experienced software engineers that date back to 80s, even 70s. So they've been around the block, and they identified some issues with methodologies that we used before, and called this one agile. And fundamentally what it is, it's basically there is no definition of done. The project is always in deployable state, which means it always is production ready, basically. At any point you can show it to the users, the stakeholders, whomever, and you don't really have, so when you go into the project, it is not uncommon that you don't actually even know what you want to make. You just have some draft of an idea of a plan, or something like that, and you just deliver a little bit of something and you show it to well, the best way is to show it to the actual users that will be using that, and gather feedback early and adjust your direction based on that feedback. That ensures that the product you developed is something that people actually want, because it's very common in this profession that it feels like something is a good idea, perhaps a feature or something, and especially around user experience, it feels like this is going to be good, but you show it to the users and it turns out that they don't want it that way, they want it completely different way, right? So if you practice agile or agile software development, you are aware of that very early, so you can adjust the course. So basically, yeah, there's no definition of done. There's the timelines are not expressed as you would typically think, that we have a plan and we want to achieve it in this amount of time. Now, the opposing methodology that we commonly refer to as waterfall is the completely opposing. So what we want to do is just develop a plan first, a timeline for our project, estimate how much effort and time it's gonna take, how much money we have to throw at it, how many engineers we're gonna need, and all of that is broken perhaps into milestones, right? So say in the first 2 months we want to have this piece achieved and we want this functionality, that kind of stuff, and we estimate that the project is going to take maybe a year, and we kind of break that year into maybe quarters, and we have goals or OKRs for each quarter, right? And this Wix sucks. This is perfectly viable, because you might hear the waterfall as kind of a derogatory term describing methodology, describing the engineering process. That agile is superior, and that's not really a good way to look at it, because it all depends on the context, basically, on what you're developing and what are the resources that you have. Now, I'm developing a ticketing system for my shop primarily, but I envision that it might be used by other shops. So the way I'm developing it is to not be tied to my shop, but to be rather universal. And I'm using a waterfall, basically. I know what I want to achieve. I know my timeline, although I'm not too keen on it's not like I'm rushing it, right? I would like to have it developed sooner rather than later. But I do make, I set up some goals for myself. So this month I want to have this feature done, right? Next month I want two different features developed. And it's perfectly fine methodology, and this is roughly what Concord used. And typically games use this methodology because, well, for some reason they want to have most of the game done before they show it to anyone. And there are some reasons for that. You want to kind of rely on a little bit of hype. You want to surprise your users, you know, that kind of stuff. It's kind of like with movie industry. It kind of that is kind of the way they develop things, right? We develop behind closed doors. We perhaps release some teasers or something like that, but it's not like we're gonna show you the half-baked game. We're gonna show you the game when it's in the mature state, right? So that obviously poses a risk, a pretty significant risk. What if this is not something that users want, right? Gamers in this case. Maybe this is completely not what they want, and we're just wasting money and time. And here we're talking about the game that took 8 years to develop, as far as I know. So that is a pretty big investment. So, having that in mind, that these are our methodologies, right? I don't know if the agile methodology would work for gaming. Mainly because first of all, it's hard with agile. That's why I don't. Well, you might say that I use agile for my ticketing system because I kind of use it. Although I don't. At the moment, I still use Hask entirely, and I just use the payment system from my application, just that part, and the rest, as far as actual ticketing and managing tickets and managing conversation with the clients and all that stuff, all that is at the moment handled by the system I'm replacing. So it's not exactly an agile, but the main reason for that is that the system is still missing few key features that would make it usable. At the moment, it's not fully usable yet. I'm actually expecting that next month I will hit this milestone of having the usable system. But we'll see about that. It's not like I have a lot of time to actually work on that. But when I develop a feature or I'm working on a feature, I kind of test it myself and just get a feel for it, basically. Like, is that good? Is that what I need? Is that easy to use? Is that functional? Right? And I look at it as a user, because I am a user. So I'm in this position where I'm developing it for myself. So I'm the only person that has to approve what I developed. Typically, you don't have that ability. You're an engineer and you answer to stakeholders. So perhaps you show your work to the stakeholders early, right? Unfinished, unbaked, half-baked product, and get a feedback from them. But stakeholders are also not users. They might be wrong. And I have countless of such examples in my career where we all thought that this was a good idea. We all thought that the feature should be done this way. Or sometimes we had different opinions, but the person in charge just decided we're going to go this way. And then we release it to the users, and users don't want it. Users don't like it. They want it done differently. That we didn't think it would be the case, right? So it is rather beneficial to release products early to your user base and gather feedback early so you can still adjust your direction. But that's not what video games do, or at least not AAA titles. And the power of waterfall is basically that you can estimate what needs to be done. You can estimate how, or you can develop a plan for how many engineers you're going to need, what the budget is going to be, and you have clear definition of done. So we want to have this developed in this timeline, right? And it needs, oh my God, look at this solder. That is the problem of these vehicles. It's just awful. So you have a clear definition of done. With Agile, you don't. So it's kind of hard to plan, hard to estimate the budget, hard to estimate what velocity we need to develop it, and no definition of done, which is very hard for us engineers, because it's basically never-ending loop of work. And yeah, you get paid in hourly or monthly salary, whatever. So basically you just get paid for the hours you work, not for the work you actually produce. So from our perspective, perhaps it's not the worst thing, but not having this delivery day, this lunch day in mind, and just constantly working, that is not great from psychological aspect as a creative engineer, as a developer. We kind of like to have some maybe not deadline per se, but some goal. We want to have something, and it's clearly defined what we have to achieve, what we have to deliver. It works better for us on, as I said, on the psychological level, because never-ending loop of development contributes to relatively quick burnout, which in turn translates to high turnover. A lot of people coming in and leaving or getting laid off or that kind of stuff. So that's not great either. That's why, if you hear the waterfall methodology being used as a derogatory term, don't buy that. It's perfectly viable and perfectly valid methodology that just needs to be used correctly. You can also, even if you use Agile, you can mess it up if you don't do it properly. And Agile belongs to the relatively complex methodologies, and it always feels chaotic. In Agile, it always feels chaotic. And not everybody likes such a work environment. Excuse me. But my point is that the company spent a lot of money on the product that by itself it didn't really seem like it would be a great hit. Maybe 8 years ago, who knows, there were some good titles, and for the some time in gaming industry, there were there was this time period where you just develop anything or deliver anything within certain genre, and it's a guaranteed success because little competition, and especially during pandemic, Everybody stayed home, played games, or at least gamers played games. And even non-gamers, because there was nothing else to do. There's obviously a social aspect to that, so it was the golden times for the industry. But if you're planning something that is going to take 8 years to develop, that is relatively high risk. I would call it extremely high risk. Because why did it cost that much? Well, 8 years. Just imagine any senior level or mid-level software engineer is going to cost you roughly $100,000, maybe $150,000 a year, maybe even more for more senior level. And say you need 50 of these, so that already gives you $5 million a year just to keep your engineers on the payroll. Right, so it's very easy to burn through $400 million for sure. Now, the majority of the cost of such endeavors, and yes, I have worked a little bit in the gaming industry, although I'm not specialized in that. Okay, so my knowledge is rather generic on this subject. But what I do know is that the majority of the cost is in asset development, because that takes artists and that takes a lot of time. So that's going to be your primary cost. Secondly, or maybe not the second big cost, but also something you have to think about if you're developing a game that is going to be played online by players, not the game that is like a puzzle game or single player story kind of game. So you need to think about the infrastructure that you're gonna need to actually keep the game running. And then if the game doesn't do well, what do? Well, are you going to keep that infrastructure? Because that's going to be a monthly cost to you just to keep the game working. So it's not like you finish the product, you throw it on the market, and it's either made you money or didn't make you money. Obviously, there are games like that as well, but that's not what Concord was or is. I don't know. Is it? Are they gonna do something with that? I think they're just gonna write it off and lay off all the engineers that worked on it, and the little guy is gonna be punished for it, not the decision makers. Well, that's the whole other story. Now, $400 million, it's a lot of money for a game. And that reminds me of the game that I used to play, MMO game, or, well, not really. It's basically a World of Tanks by Wargaming. This was I played that game when it just released. It was new, and it took Poland by storm and a few other countries. I think it's the Russian game studio that developed it. And initially, I loved the game because it was simple. It didn't have too advanced graphics. It was kind of an arcade tank simulator. It's not realistic at all, or semi-realistic, whatever. But the ease of that game was what captured our attention. And the reason was each tank was basically in memory. It was just a big box with the turret on it, which was another box, and whenever you shot to that box, you score a hit, right? Unless your gun is inferior and the enemy armor is superior that your gun cannot possibly penetrate. But as long as it penetrates and the angle is enough to penetrate, you score a hit. Then they developed a advanced model of the damage control, or the damage model. I don't know how it worked, but based on the size of the files that I analyzed, it was basically a lookup list of every possible angle. And you can probably already taste the issue with that solution is that what if my angle is not in that lookup list? It's not in that table. That means I lose the shot, right? I lost the shell. The shell went into your tank, but you received no damage because it wasn't on the lookup table. That was horribly demotivating and horribly annoying when we started playing after that update, and you start scoring those 0 HP hits on the enemy. And that was the state of the game for many months to come, while they were improving the grass, the sky, the tank models, which the like butterflies and birds flying around, so the foliage much higher resolution and better. Basically all the stuff that none of us wanted, because many people shared my opinion, or I shared their opinion, that it would be much better if the game was just boxes, red boxes and blue boxes, and we just fight, no graphics, no nothing. So it's playable on pretty much any possible machine. It runs in 120 frames per second on some crappy computer, and it's fun because that's what made the game fun. But instead of listening to the feedback of the players, they started developing a beautiful game that didn't work. However, I gotta give them the credit where credit's due. They also developed a World of Warships, and also World of Warplanes. And World of Warships was the last game, or out of this kind of genre. They started with tanks, then planes, and the ships came last. So the ships game was done amazingly. There's nothing I can say, nothing bad I can say about that game. They basically learned from those previous two games and developed an awesome game. There are some bugs and stuff, especially in the interface, but nothing major, nothing that would affect the gameplay. The gameplay is awesome. The sounds are great. Graphics are impressive, but there are some issues with graphics. A lot of bugs revolve around graphics. It's probably the compatibility of my card, maybe, or not enough memory. I don't know. So again, a little bit too heavy on the graphics side, but as far as playability of the game and the whole concept of how the game is played, absolutely amazing. They definitely learned how to develop these games from the previous titles. Now with Concord, the failure, I think, revolves around the same idea, that they just developed what they wanted to develop, not what the players wanted to play. And again, since it wasn't an agile methodology, it's not like they could gather that feedback early, right? They released the game, and actually, when they released the beta version, it was already an indicator That if you're releasing something for free that you will later charge $40 for, and you have very minimum engagement from the players. I would expect that out of all the players that participated in beta, about 10% of them is a good score. If you score 10% of those users will purchase the game when it releases. I would see that as a success. But if your beta is not even really doesn't really garner much attention or positive feedback, then what do you do then? Because it's not like you can change the whole game like that, right? It was waterfall. We delivered what was asked from us, and it didn't work. There's nothing else we can do. So now the fallout of all that is, unfortunately, we are to blame, us, the engineers, the software developers, And why are we to blame? It wasn't our idea. It wasn't our fault, right? Well, the reason is simple. We are relatively expensive, because I know what a lot of people say, that developers are gonna be punished for this failure, even though it's not their fault, and the executives that make a lot more money than engineers will suffer no consequences. But it's not exactly that, because those executives, they make a lot of money perhaps, but there's only few of them. We don't make that much money, but there are many of us. So when you kind of compare those costs, the majority of the cost of the game was to pay the developers. And I don't mean just software engineers, mainly artists and asset designers and all that. Creative work is rather expensive work. It's time-consuming work, it's energy-consuming, and it's not like you can force creativity, and it's not like you can speed up creativity. Myself as a software engineer specialized in the backend, you can speed me up. You can put some pressure on me, and I will deliver faster than I would normally deliver. Perhaps by cutting some corners, or perhaps just working overtime, that kind of stuff. But with creative work, you can't force that. You can't speed it up. It's going to take as long as it's going to take, right? And my work just impacts the stability of the product and then functionality and stuff, right? Whether if it's buggy, it's my fault. But if the art doesn't land, well, I have no impact on that, right? But then you have to look closely and think, how did I treat my designers, people responsible for this game to kind of hit its mark when it comes to visual aspect and stuff. Now, opinion that I hear about Concord, because obviously I haven't played it and I have no desire to, not because it's just not my thing, right? This genre is just kind of not my thing. So I have nothing against the game, and I hear that it's playable. It's not bad. but most people had a problem with artwork, and the writing. Two crucial things, not in my view, but in view of the players, especially when you're coming up with the game that, there's at least 5 titles that are very similar to this one, so you really need to have some selling point. So I primarily care about playability, right? I don't really care that much about the characters or the story or anything like that. Whatever games I play that do have this aspect, all the cinematics and stuff, I just skip all that. Right? I'm not interested in the story. There are very few games that I have kind of followed the story. One of them was GTA 5. I thought the story, especially at the closer to the end, it became a little more engaging, and then at the end you have the option of choosing your own ending, how you want the game to end. I think that's a nice touch, but typically I don't care about those. Typically I really couldn't care less. I just care about the playability of the game, the mechanics, and whether the game is fun, right? And since I'm not a gamer, I just, from time to time I just have half an hour to kill, or maybe not to kill. I just have to think about something, right? I'm stepped away from coding, and I just have to let my brain process some stuff. So I just start some game where there's only 1 button or 2 buttons, and nothing really, you just jump directly into the game, into the action, right? So typically that's how I treat the games as non-gamer. So maybe my opinion is not the most relevant in this discussion. But if your whole goal is to develop something that will engage players, and there are many similar titles to choose from, you really have to deliver. You really have to do something amazing. Otherwise, it's just going to be another game that is similar to other games. And there's fundamentally nothing wrong with that, as long as you didn't spend $400 million on it. And here lies the main issue that I have with this whole situation. That this was just irresponsible. This is something that probably the majority of gamers could have told you. And these are your customers. You should listen to them, not me. I barely buy any games ever. So, it's not like you're making money off of me per se, or at least not much money off of me. But I have a friend that is a gamer, kind of a serious gamer. As far as the seriousness of his gaming, he plays Dota. It's a pretty popular game. Kind of like what was it, World of Warcraft? No, Diablo? No, it's kind of the mouse smasher. And you control the magical characters, and you gain abilities and stuff, and it's also like a 5v5, I think, or something like that, and you just have to gain control of the territory. But also, when I see his Steam library, you know, when you unhook this check mark that show me only playable games to show you all the games from your library, you know, the list just keeps scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. So I would say he definitely spends a few $100s, maybe a few $1,000s a year on games. So that would be a player that I would definitely seek input from or feedback relatively early. That's the player I would want to participate in beta testing and all that stuff, right? Now, did they do any of that? I don't know. Maybe they did, which would be even worse if they did. Because here's the problem. We, the software engineers, we have very little creative control over what we engineer, what we develop. You know? And we have relatively a small, insignificant impact on the creative direction and basically what the game is, right? So we just have to do what you tell me to do and basically not ask questions, that kind of stuff. Definitely not criticize. If you've ever been in such situation, you know what I'm talking about, but you know, you're gonna get canned if you criticize too much. Even if your criticism is valid and warranted, and listening to that criticism would improve the game or improve the product, you're still gonna get canned. So we just have to stay quiet sometimes. It sucks, but that's the reality of this business. So our job is just to get the job done. And all of us kind of emotionally attach ourselves to the product we work on. We want our product to be successful. We want our code to work. We want the finished product to be liked, to be appreciated. So sometimes it's a big deal for us. So you as an executive, you know, the stakeholder that initiated the product or this whole project and maintained a creative direction or maintained the control over creative direction of the product, you are responsible for succeeding for all of our sake. We are, you know, software engineers. We are just like any other blue-collar worker, right? We want to feed our families, bring home the bacon, right? And you know, and have fun on the weekend. You know, not much more than that. These are our goals. So now if you fail, then you're not only cost the company a lot of money, but you also cost me my job. You also cost me some emotional damage, because again, we're gonna be the ones to blame. And in some cases, and especially in this case, some people from the studio were a bit too condescending and like kind of taking a moral high ground that, you know, how dare you criticizing us? We are the professionals, and we know what we're doing, right? Basically convincing players that, yeah, you should like this game, and you should appreciate this game, and you should pay the money for this game, and then you should play that game. You know, Mark Zuckerberg already tried that with the metaverse, didn't work. So now I guess Sony followed in his footsteps, trying the very same way. And probably, I guarantee that there were some employees basically softly forced to play the game. In beta, that is very common because you need players to evaluate the game, right? So obviously you're going to use your employees, and, you know, I probably, especially if the game is fun and it's some kind of game that I like, you know, I wouldn't mind spending 4 hours a day at work playing the game, or maybe 8 hours, who knows. But there definitely have been some period where employees were encouraged to play the game. I bet that some employees just volunteered to do that because, again, we get emotionally invested in our work. We want it to succeed. Plus, it's kind of a, you know, especially if you have been on the team for 8 years developing that game, then yeah, obviously you want to play it on the launch day, and maybe publish your own blog, or maybe, you know, some YouTube videos, you know, talking about the game from behind the scenes, and, you know, expressing your sense of fulfillment, making it to the release date. You know, 8 years, that is a long time, you know. I don't think I've worked 8 years for any company ever. No, I don't. No, not even close. Not even close. Usually, my timeline in any company is between like 2 and 4 years, for various reasons. In some cases, I quit. In some cases, I get laid off. In some cases, you know, the company stops existing, or the team stops existing, and, you know, that kind of stuff. It's a kind of a volatile market because of that. Because of those decisions being made at the top, that sometimes are not the best decisions. And as a director of such an endeavor, it is your obligation to your employees to make the game successful, to make the product successful. It doesn't really have to be a game, any kind of endeavor in software engineering. It is your obligation to be successful, because you're not only playing with your own money, or not only you're playing with someone else's money, but also you're playing with other people's lives and livelihood. There was probably going to be a team assembled or built from the current team for maintenance of the infrastructure, for bug fixes and all that kind of stuff, basically to maintain the game, right? And now this team is never going to be built, and the team that built the game is probably getting laid off, which in turn, if you're in the same boat as I have been for a couple months now, looking for a job as a software engineer, that is even worse for you, because now there's going to be plenty of competition. Not that there wasn't enough to begin with, but now there's going to be even more. All these poor engineers thrown out are going to look for another job. and that's gonna make it harder for all of us. Sad situation. I would say it's a sad situation, and unfortunately it's very common in this industry. Unfortunately, very common. I hope at the top of Sony's executive chain they will at least consider this as a case from which they can learn something, you know, how not to make this mistake again. And if it used to be that game development was a game of passion, right? Games were a lot smaller, games were developed a lot quicker, and they were fun to play. They were cheap and fun to play. Now it just kind of feels like they abandoned the whole idea of developing something new. They just want to have another project to which they want to throw, say, $10 million and get $150 million from it. And that's all they care about, those numbers. It has been, so see, and either in Agile or basically in Scrum methodology, we have this idea of sprints that usually take 2 weeks, and we measure velocity using the point system in Fibonacci sequence. Each task is estimated in those points. Some companies just directly translate those points into hours, which kind of is a weird idea in my view, because why don't we just estimate in hours if that's what we're doing? Why do we use points, and why do I need the conversion table between points and hours? So let's just estimate hours. Nothing wrong with that fundamentally, but the idea behind those points was that you estimate a complexity, not the time. So some less complex problems could be time-consuming, and some more complex tasks could be less time-consuming. Like basically, you can develop them quicker, but you need to put in a lot more effort. And in some, you know, they're more repetitive and tedious, and you just, you know, it's low complexity, low effort, but a lot of time. But with those points, regardless of what they represent, we measure velocity. And, you know, some engineer maybe burns 50 points per sprint, the other 25, and the other 75, right? It's all estimates, so it kind of means nothing, but that's what the business wants, right? We want to have numbers so we can show to the stakeholders that we burned through 150 points this sprint, and previous sprint we only burned through 80, so we have great improvement. Or we greatly overestimated the work we did in this sprint. But that's what they want, and if your focus is on that primarily, then you're gonna have such issues. Because at the end of the day, well, what have we developed, right? We're not delivering points. We're delivering value. We're delivering code. We're delivering a product, not points or estimates. So yeah, I guess my point is, don't judge the engineers that worked on it or by don't judge, I mean don't take it up on them. Likewise, don't put all the blame on the management, because the management also has like those rules and stuff, and they just followed the rules. That's what they have to do. They have to play by the rules, right? Everything looked great, probably, as they were working on it. Probably everything looked great, and was very promising. It just didn't work. No one could have predicted that. No one could have seen that coming. Well, I guess they should. If they're paid big bucks, they should have seen it, right? But again, don't put the whole blame on the management. They are just the cog in this big machine, just as much as the engineers and designers and artists. Sometimes you have to fail. And yeah, I hear a lot of people just kind of, looking at it with 20/20 hindsight, which is easy, and pointing out that of course it wasn't gonna work, because this is bad and that is bad, and you have this much competition and stuff. But I wouldn't, it's, if you said that 8 years ago, if there was a timeline saying that it's going to take 8 years, if you said that 8 years ago, maybe that would have held some value. But after it's all done, no, it just as well could have been a success. And probably the comments from the employees also didn't help, and maybe that was the triggering factor of this failure, maybe. But I guess, I don't know, I guess they didn't learn from Rachel Zegler, which is also too bad. But again, try to understand them. They invested a lot of time and effort and beliefs into this. So yes, they're gonna feel a little bit emotional about this. It's not gonna be rational decision on their part, and that is also understandable. Understand your fellow human. None of us is perfect. Just don't crucify them quickly just for that. But that's just some thoughts on Concord disaster from the perspective of a typical mediocre software engineer with some experience in gaming industry. I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you guys very much for watching. I do appreciate you. And I shall see you in the next one.